This week on the show, we're having the new one from Firestone Walker, Sunglider, and I'm also going to talk to Ron from Admiral Maltings. They made the malt that is used in this. Phenomenal conversation, all that and more coming up on Beer in Front. Sometimes the beer in front of you is the best one yet. This is Beer in Front. Every week I'll talk to people in and around the beer world and get their stories all about beer. That's Beer in Front, and it's coming up now. Welcome to episode 295 of Beer in Front. I'm your host, Dave Zalatoris, and Beer in Front is a charter member of the Beer Media Group. I hope you like malt. Well, you do. You listen to this show. You like malt. I got a great guest. I'm talking to Ron Silberstein. He's over at Admiral Maltings in California. Phenomenal interview. Usually my interviews, and you're looking at this podcast and saying, Dave, you're like an hour. You're never an hour. Ron can talk, and Ron is a phenomenal guest. I love talking to Ron. So the most of this is going to be about Admiral Maltings. I am going to have a beer from Firestone Walker, Sunglider. This is a golden ale that they sent me. They use malt from Admiral Malting. So I kind of wanted to tie that in. And then Ron and I just kept talking and talking. So it's mostly Ron. But it was a great interview. I'm going to do some more stuff on the Sunglider over on video. So be sure to follow me over on YouTube and Instagram and all the social media channels. I'm there. So hunt me down and I'll have some more in-depth, longer reviews of the Sunglider. Since the interview was really long, I'm not going to do a news segment this week. I'll just double it up next week. Next week's a good show, too. I'm talking to Ska Brewing about their new West Coast IPA. But back to this episode. You got to stay tuned. Listen to Ron. That was a lot of fun. The beer Sunglider was good as well. So it's going to be a fun episode. If you listened to the show last week when I had the craft beer concierge, Alo Galinsky, on, we were talking about the new book that he's a contributing author on. He had a piece in the book. Well, yesterday, I'm recording this Sunday night, the 22nd of March. Yesterday, over at Old Irving, Matthew from Old Irving, who's been on the show before, he's another contributing author. A few other people that I have spoken to on the show that had a piece in there. So it was really cool for the book release party here in Chicago. That was just a lot of fun. Thank you to Old Irving for hosting this. Trevor is a phenomenal host. Matthew's a great guy. Everyone, Jess, the author, everyone there was great. I don't want to leave anybody out, but it was fantastic. Had a couple rare beers. I even had a Goat Destroyer from OIB that was right off the tank, so that was really good. Picked up a beer that I brought home, and I'll post over on video that was a Czech Pilsner from Old Irving that was just spectacular. And you may think of them for Beezer, but it's such a great brewery, and they do every style they do is great. And this Czech Pilsner was fantastic. So watch out for social media and look at YouTube to see the review on that. But that was a great time over at Old Irving. Real quick personal note before we get on with the show. So I told you a couple weeks ago I'm doing this work conditioning for my elbow. And we won't even get into the debacle that this is, because my elbow still hurts and it hurts like hell. But I'm at work conditioning. In the parking lot, someone hits the car. They hit the driver's side door, and now the door doesn't open. I'm not a small guy. My fat ass is crawling in to get into the car to drive home. That's something I'm glad nobody took video of that. That's something you don't want to see on TikTok. Me trying to crawl through and hop over the car. I think I violated myself on my water bottle, but the car's getting fixed this week and we'll work on getting my elbow fixed. But whoever hit the car, you're a jagoff. You should have wrote a note saying, "Dude, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna have words with you." All right, that's enough of me rambling. Let's get on with the show and Admiral Maltings and Firestone Walker. Let's talk about something that makes up the majority of your beer and somehow gets the least attention. We obsess over hops. We argue about yeast strains. We line up for hazy IPAs like we did for Beanie Babies back in the 90s. But the thing that is literally the backbone of every beer you drink, malt. Today's guest is Ron Silberstein from Admiral Maltings, one of the pioneers of the modern craft malting movement. And if you think malt is just a commodity, just a canvas, just something that shows up on your invoice, hopefully this conversation is going to change that, because here's the reality. If hops are the headline, malt is the foundation of the story, and foundations matter. Ron, thank you so much for taking time out to chat today.
Oh, I'm stoked to be here, Dave, and to talk about one of my favorite subjects, malt. So yeah, I think just as a comment really to what you said, I had a mentor, Dr. Lewis from UC Davis. He was the first Anheuser-Busch endowed professor there. And he always told us that, malt is the potato and hops is the salt on the potato. And I think that's just a spectacular analogy. And, again, to hone in on the importance of it. Can you imagine a winemaker that you go up to a winemaker and you go, "Hey, so what kind of what grape variety are you using?" And the winemaker goes, I don't know, red." Oh, it's just inconceivable. And yet that's where we found ourselves, before basically the sort of craft malt revolution, I'll call it. Although it's not it's a very small revolution. It's not quite a full blown one yet.
Well, before you got into malt, you had a brewery, the Thirsty Bear. What made you want to get into this part of the industry?
Well, I had Thirsty Bear Brewery for 27 years in downtown San Francisco. Unfortunately, it became a victim of the pandemic. Just the downtown just shut down. But we were an organic brewery. We went organic, I think it was 2007. I mean, a good number of years ago. And I always was very focused on ingredients. I think back at that time, to be honest, it was really more, how is it grown? What does it do to the soil? What does it do to the workers? What does it do to the birds and the bees and this? And so for me at that time, it was more focusing on on just the health and the health to the land, health to people aspects, as opposed to, oh, an organic piece of barley is kind of like an organic peach. It just is so much better. Yeah, I mean, we mash it, we boil it, we add hops, we ferment it, we do a lot of things. So I'm not going to say that you instantly recognize organic versus non-organic. But it does lead to soil practices, and it does create a stronger barley variety in a sense because it doesn't have the assistance of all these petrochemicals. And so there will be flavor subtleties that are in there too. But so I had always been interested in organic, and quite frankly, a farmer in Woodland named Nigel Walker from a farm called Eat Well Farms. He was sort of early in the organic movement. He gave me a call one day and just said, "Hey, I'm growing some organic barley. Why don't you make some beer out of it?" And I'm like, "Whoa, there's a small little step, between barley and beer." And just in case your listeners, and I know you can edit all this stuff the way you want, but in case your listeners want to hear it, I do want to take 1 second to say what malt is, because someone can take a grape and just smush it, and the yeast that's on the grape and the water soluble sugars that are very simple sugars in the grape can be fermented. The yeast can eat it away. Same thing with an apple if you're smushing it into cider. But if you take grain and you grind it up, and in particular, let's talk barley, you grind up barley. and add water and add yeast. You might get bread, but you're not going to get a fermented product. You're not going to get beer. And so the little something that has to be done between barley and beer is called malting. We use this mystical word. It doesn't really describe it. That I mean, the process is essentially soak, germinate, dry. That's what we do. And all we do is follow Mother Nature. We follow what a seed does. A seed has all these complex starches stored away in itself, wrapped up in cellulose and proteins and this sort of thing. And it can last the whole winter under the soil while it's waiting for nice warm water on a spring day to grow. And so it has some very complex starches and other, pentasams, or it's just different proteins in there. So the malting process simply is the seed going, hey, I got to call on all this energy that's stored in here, and I got to grow a plant. But we trick it. I have to admit, we do trick it. We don't let it grow a plant. We don't want to grow a plant. We want it to simply modify all that goodness that's inside the seed, and that's the malting process. And so that's what we do. And to go back to that farmer, though, when he called me and everything, I sort of looked into it, and essentially, there were the very beginnings of craft malting there. And I heard about a malting facility and a farmer who just, unless they did some sort of vertical integration, was going to have to sell the farm. Well, Colorado Maltings back in Alamosa, Colorado. And so I ended up sending this barley that this farmer in Woodland grew all the way to Alamosa. They malted it, and then we made a, quote, locavore ale with some hops from up in Clear Lake here in California. And that's what set me down the journey, is I realized, "Oh my god, the barley quality was excellent." And again, my original mentor, Dr. Lewis, connected me with the small grain breeding program at UC Davis. And there was a guy there who had been working on a barley strain for 15 years, because historically, between 1860 and 1940, barley was California's most important agricultural product. And it may surprise a lot of people. And we even used to export our barley to England, where they called it sun-kissed because it was so bright and clean and had no fusarium, no head blight or anything like that. But we grew some of the originally we grew two-row from Europe and all. We grew Hana, which it was from the Hana region of the Czech Republic, in the Pilsen area, where the very first Pilsners came from. We grew Hanchen, that was developed here. We grew Betsy's Pyroline, several European-based two-row varieties back then. And we were really well known for it. I had a handbook for floor malting that was written in England in like 1902, and they extolled the virtues. I mean, they listed the best barleys you can get, and of course, some of them were English barleys, but right up at the top, California barley.
Wow.
They didn't give it a name back then, so it was California barley. The Spanish had brought over a barley from North Africa, so it was called a North African barley, over 550 years ago, and it became a land race in California. In other words, it became well adapted to the climate, the temperatures, and the disease pressures on barley then. And actually, that land race, the UC Davis chose in 1900, selected 200 different lines that they thought were the best suited for barley. I'm sorry, for malt barley, because it is different than feed barley, different in terms of the desirable characteristics. It's indistinguishable to the naked eye. But they selected 200 lines, and from that, they created the first malt barley variety issued by UC Davis, and they called it Atlas, in a nod to the Atlas Mountains, because they believed the barley originally came from there. So I'm not inventing anything here. I'm simply I was going to say rebirth. That sounds kind of funny, but giving wing to a very old tradition here. But the climate in California is exceptionally well suited to barley because barley is a drought tolerant crop. It doesn't need all the water that almond trees need, or tomatoes, or alfalfa, or a lot of the other crops grown here in California. Fruit trees, nut trees, all that, not even close to what these need. It can grow quite comfortably on the 17 inches of, average rainfall that falls in the Sacramento Valley. And in fact, if it rains too much, it'll get a little peaked. It gets a little yellow. It might, the protein content might go off. And so it's, it doesn't want too much rain. So it's an ideal crop for cover crop. Uh, then you don't get to necessarily harvest the barley, but for crop rotation in particular in California, and as an alternative to some of the, high demand water crops that are in particular in areas like the Central Valley. We have such limited water resources. You can actually keep more land in production with a product like barley, and that would be our dream. If barley became more of a crop in California because of its inherent sustainable nature. And so, yeah, but I was just going back, I mean, from that simple question, like, what got me into malt and all that, but I think it just comes from 2 things: being very interested in ingredients, and that organic farmer who gave me a call that led me down a rabbit hole. And, it really wasn't until, World War II with the submarine warfare that we stopped exporting, barley to England and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So it was still a pretty strong crop during Prohibition and everything as well?
Yes, and I have a great story, from one of the farmers. We mostly work with farmers in the Sacramento Valley, and, they've been there hundreds of years. This, one is like 4th or 5th generation farmer, not hundreds, but since the late 1800s. So, mid to late 1800s. His father grew, I mean, with a mule team. These guys have pictures of a mule team harvesting the barley and all that, and it was sent, this is during Prohibition, to England. Now, there was a fire that broke out in, this is the Hungry Hollow area, the sort of northwest of Sacramento, near, woodland, basically. There was a huge fire, wiped out probably over 1,000 acres, just burned out. And this guy is the guy I work with, his grandfather or great-grandfather, I don't recall which, has a telegram from England. "Oh, we're so sorry for your loss." The malt houses there would send them, because they would get, bags stamped, from the farmer in California and on. Yeah, so it was grown. It was a big product back then.
And also, speaking of World War II, Admiral Maltings is in a former World War II naval dry goods facility in Alameda. I mean, what drew you to that space?
Well, I live in Alameda,
Right.
and, so I wanted my business to be close to home. No, that's part of it, but, if you recall, back in the day, St. George Spirits opened a distillery there, and then there were a few wineries that opened there. Faction Brewing opened there, and it just became more of an attractive, they were, repurposed. A lot of them were hangars, buildings bigger and, newer than ours. But yeah, ours was built in 1944. It's gorgeous, all this redwood, it looks like a cathedral on the inside. And so it was both just the openness and the space, and the idea of this is that clearly we're paying almost top dollar for, rent and labor, paying California farmers. You're gonna pay top dollar for them to grow barley for you, because they have a lot of other, crops that they could get more per acre unless they're paid, a respectable price. But we thought that it would be really good as a showcase, so that people could see the malting process, so that they could taste beers made with that malt. We knew we couldn't compete with the larger, breweries, I'm sorry, with the larger, malting companies, the multinational malting companies, so we had to focus on something. So our focus is California grown. It's, We use a barley that was developed at UC Davis, that one small grain breeder that Dr. Lewis had introduced me to. Lynn Gallagher was his name, Dr. Lynn Gallagher, and we work with farmers who use sustainable practices if possible. We like to do minimal till or no till so that the microbiome and the fungi and bacteria remain intact in the soil. But as important in today's age, you have all this carbon that's sequestered in the soil. Whenever you have roots growing there, whenever you have a cover crop, as long as there's something on top of the soil, you're sequestering carbon, as opposed to allowing the carbon in the soil to interact with the oxygen in the air and release CO2. So, um, yeah, just Callie, I'm losing my train of thought because I go off on all these tangents of just one thing makes me think about another. But as far as in California, I think I was honing in on some of the particulars of what we like. And again, it's going to be California grown. It's going to be sustainably grown. It's with this Butter 12, primarily Butter 12. We use all sorts of specialty grains, which is part of the fun of what we can give people different grains. But we also use a very traditional method of malting that's extraordinarily rare nowadays. There's just a handful, really, in the world of companies that still floor malt, and we floor malt, and so the malt is spread in thin layers on the floor. It's turned by hand. That germination takes place more naturally and with a nice little layer of CO2 surrounding, because the respiration of the barley, it takes in oxygen, puts out CO2 as it's growing, as it's germinating. And so it's its own microbiome, its own little environment in there, in contrast to barley that's malted industrially, often in what we call a solid in box, where it's pneumatically turned by huge augers and or rake-like machines that slowly turn it as it's on a false bottom where humidified, chilled, oxygenated air is passed through the barley bed. And that accelerates respiration, and they get to actually, it takes about a day less to germinate it, when you're doing that. But we do it in this very gentle, slightly slower way that people have done studies on, and show that people, on a hedonic level, as in a preference, just like here are two beers and in a blind, exactly identical, same malt, same everything, identical, and I taste them, and people do prefer the floor malted one. Crisp had done a study where they looked at the metabolites, the metabolomics of what comes off the barley in there, and they found big differences. They didn't drill down necessarily into every flavor compound, but they found fundamental differences between those. Crisp, in fact, is one of they have records of having used California barley in the early 1900s and stuff like that. Just as we did a collaboration with them using Hana, which again is a European, originally from the Pilsen area, the Czech Republic. And yeah, they shared that information with us. Like, yeah, we used to, a century ago, we would actually get barley from you guys. So it was kind of fun to do that full circle and do that collaboration. But so that's what we do to try and distinguish ourselves is yeah, just those key characteristics. And I think the last thing is that we're able to get malt to brewers that's fresh. And fresh malt, it's like bread out of the oven, coffee out of the roaster. The aromatics in there absolutely positively translate into the finished product and just have this aroma and a mouth, just a quality about it that I feel like I can tell, especially in lagers,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
lagers, but you also have a pub there. I was reading the Rake Pub. So this was conceived of what I was reading, that every beer poured out of the pub would be made with Admiral malt. Is this a way to, like, how are the customer? I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Like, do the customers notice a difference? Are they like as geeked out about this as we are?
Well, unfortunately, we all know customers can be less attentive than one would like. I've had customers. We have it's the Malt House Pub, and it's sort of what I was talking about earlier. Like, oh my God, we have. Thanks for bringing me back to that. But we pay more for the rent, we pay more for all this, but we want to be in an area where we can show people, show brewers and distillers, hey, this is how malt is made. This is how your beer is made. We don't brew it, but this is how your spirits are made. And so the pub is supposed to be a showcase for that. We definitely give lots of brewers and distillers tours in there, and it can sell them on what is ultimately a more expensive product. The geeks, yes, people go in there and geek out, and they see we offer a selection of lagers like few other bars do. People are in their A game. They're paying top dollar for our malt. They're going to put their best, and they care about the ingredients. These are people who really care. They're not just trying to pump it out or have some other thing. So yes, but like I said, I'll have people pointing through the window from the pub that overlooks the malt floor, where basically you can watch grass grow. I mean, there's just seeds germinating. Um, and you can maybe see a little rootlet or whatever, but people point to that very knowingly to their friend and go, "Yeah, those are the hops." Or you know what I mean? Or yeah, they're drying the malt there. We're germinating it, for
Yeah.
crying out loud. Right in a kiln. But anyway, people try, and it is an attempt for us to connect. If I would say we have one mission, it's that barley is beer.
Mhm.
Beer is an agricultural product. End of story. If there weren't a farmer, there'd be no barley, and if there weren't barley, there'd be no malt, and no malt, no beer.
No
And
beer, absolutely.
that's really what we try and connect people to, is just this simple, agricultural nature that and the farmers just love it. They love seeing their product and then drinking it in a can of beer. It gives them such satisfaction, because so often their product leaves, they have no idea where it's used, what it goes into. It never comes back to them, often in more industrial settings. So it's very rewarding on that level too.
Yeah.
We'd like to say that we're connecting the brewer or the distiller to their maltster and their farmer, reconnecting that little group. Yeah,
It's the big circle of life. You go from the farmer right back to their glass of beer.
that's what we want people to realize
Mhm.
when they look at a glass of beer. Not like, because just most people don't really, they think beer might be made from hops, and again, I love hops. I
Mhm.
don't want a beer that's not spiced.
Yeah.
I don't want to brew it, to be quite honest. Yeah, I've definitely come to appreciate the nuances and the subtleties and the backbone that a really nice malt can give, especially in a quality lager, where the highlight is on that malt, and just a little balance with the hop, to take away the sweetness or the maltiness, and just present something that's eminently drinkable and complex, that you can savor over a period of time.
Well, the beer that's this episode is going to be Sunglider from Firestone Walker. I read the press release on this a couple weeks ago and saw that they were going to be using craft malt, which was super cool. How did this project with Firestone Walker come about?
Well, they're awesome. Number one, I mean, they're obviously one of those uh, breweries that are very, very thoughtful about what they do. And so it started in a way. I work with the propagator, so we work with the one in Venice, there down there, where Sam Tierney, he's the lead brewer or the head brewer, whatever you want to call it. He runs the propagator down there, and so we always, not always, but often throughout the years, have been sending them malt, and they've done little experiments. So we did have a farmer in Paso Robles, not too far from the brewery, that was growing that Atlas barley. In other words, many ranchers, that was what they used for feed. That's what they used to feed their cattle or their goats or their sheep, whatever. And that's what it was, a 6-row barley, or it is a 6-row barley. And there was a farmer there who was growing that. And so I They actually were interested in that at first, and we did some beers with that, but I didn't I didn't have enough for them to do a full production run, of the Sunglider, and they had already used the Admiral pills. They loved that. They used that regularly in the propagator, and so they just wanted to do a big run of that, and, we couldn't have been happier. I mean, Firestone it was through the Firestone Walker Invitational, actually, that we had another really unique sale in that Kyuchi 1823. They originally made sake from the 1800s in Japan, but they have Hitachi no Nest beer. It's a pretty I hadn't heard of it, to be quite honest, before, but apparently they do distribute in in the States, and it's a pretty well-known in Japan, it's a huge craft beer. And they visited our malt house and, ordered, I think they first learned about us perhaps through the Firestone International Invitational, and they visited our malt house, and, they also have, it's called Hino Maru, a distillery, and they got a 40-foot container, 20 metric tons that they're using in their distillery and their brewery, so that was really fun. That's fresher than anything they can get.
Okay,
You
yeah.
could say we it goes from our kiln to the Port of Oakland, which is a whole 2 miles away, and 2 weeks shipped to them. They'd never had malt that was 2 weeks old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it was really cool, but, and another distributor there who, worked with Yoho Brewery in Japan, another craft brewery. We sent some, malt for them. Again, I think they had first heard about Yoho had first heard about our malt at the Firestone Invitational there, the beer invitational. So that's kind of fun. I mean, our goal has been more, uh, focused on California. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about in the carbon footprint low, supporting your local farmer, a reliable supply chain, all these good things that come from supporting local economies. But hell, if someone in, I think you spoke about Hop Butcher in
Yeah.
Chicago, or I mean, I just sent a couple batches to this uh, Orchid Island Brewery in Florida. There's a organic brewery in Wisconsin. I'm sending some to Mount Holly in Vermont, and these are just because people really want
Yeah.
this, from one farmer, California barley. There's nothing wrong with California, but,
Yeah.
you could see that, and, so if they wanna pay for the shipment and all that, and, yeah,
We'll
that's
send it
awesome.
out, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
but,
Well,
yeah.
so you mentioned earlier, Buddha 12, and that's the barley for Sunglider that I was reading. What's different
Yes.
about the Buddha 12 compared to usual barleys?
Well, really, it in some ways, I mean, you either have these land races that had unusual characteristics like the Hana, that was the first, barley used in a Pilsner malt, or, like this Atlas barley that was but at the end of the day, um it does not take any longer 3 weeks on the malt floor to germinate. It
Mhm.
takes 4 to 5 days. So, we have been breeding barley to better serve brewers and maltsters and farmers. Farmers don't want a barley that's subject to disease, and so literally the yellow dwarf virus and striped rust were two diseases in California that kind of really hurt our barley crop post World War II. That's probably one reason that by the 60s, we just weren't really growing much barley here anymore. But so he thought, but the climate's perfect for it and all. And so he bred a barley that had resistance to both of these. In particular, yellow dwarf virus, not as much with striped rust. And then, I might have that backwards, but whatever. Hopefully your listeners will forgive me. But it had some resistance to at least both that. Also yield. Some of these older varieties might yield 1,000 pounds an acre, and you might get other varieties that can yield anywhere from 2 to 4,000 pounds an acre. So if a farmer's going to do the same amount of work and get 4,000 pounds versus 1,000 pounds, so you don't want to torture your farmer. You don't want your maltster to take a month to make malt.
Yeah.
You want it or 3 weeks. You want it until we take about 7 or 8 days, to make our malt. So there was disease resistance. It involved some full pint, which was developed by Dr. Pat Hayes up at Oregon State University. He's recently retired, but he's just a legend. And he's created some other barley that we're using from Oregon. For example, he created a barley line where he crossed Golden Promise with Full Pint, another variety that he had, and he created Oregon Promise. And we grew some. Well, we didn't grow it, but Goshi Farms, which is a really well-known hop farm, they were one of the original hop farms in the Willamette Valley, back from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they like to use it as a rotational crop. And so we grew this Oregon Promise and we're trying to get that to some Oregon brewer. We floor malt it, but send it back to these Oregon brewers. So, this had some storied flavor characteristics that people notice in Golden Promise. He did another one where he crossed Maris Otter with a German variety and created, it's a winter barley, which is, again, a more sustainable way of growing because you can plant it in the winter. It
Yeah.
takes advantage of all the melting snow, all the little moisture that it gets comes up the second it's ready. You don't have to worry about, oh, there's too much rain. I can't get the tractor in the field. We got to wait. Whatever. It's coming up and it's just a stronger, the roots go in deeper. You have, I think, number one, you need less water to grow it, so it's more sustainable. But number two, I think you get a more flavorful product, from malt from these winter barleys. In some instances, think about it. If the roots are in the soil for a longer time, it can pick up more goodness from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, there's you can so this is we're trying to grow some of that. Actually, Gail up at Goshi Farms is going to be growing some of this Elantra. We had a grower up in Tule Lake, I think 3 years. Frost got it 1 year, drought got it another, and grasshoppers got it another. He's done.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not doing this one anymore.
What's that?
And
The locust? Yeah. What?
literally, it was a biblical plague. It was
Yeah.
horrible. They just completely wiped it out. So anyway, but so barley varieties, there are, and I think this Buddha 12 has some very unique. For example, it doesn't have such high fan. It doesn't have such high soluble proteins. And so both these things can add to its flavor profile. It's a harder, it's interesting. I'm not sure how this contributes to the flavor profile, but it's less friable in general. In other words, like when you mill it, but it's fully modified. It's not friability often is a measurement of modification, but but if you do a coarse fine difference, like, oh, what's the extract if it's coarse? What's the extract like if it's fine? If it's not too different, if it's very similar, then it's clearly well modified, even if it's less friable. And this barley is less friable than some of the North American varieties, let's say like Copeland or Connect or something like that. But it still modifies fairly well. We've just found it to be a unique. It has a unique flavor
All right.
characteristic that we like, and it wasn't bred for flavor. But it did use some full pint, it did use some other things, and it just and another, not astounding, but another excellent, characteristic that it has is it has no GN, or what's called glycosidic nitrile. That is more something distillers care about because, glycosidic nitrile, which is in the acrospire of or the first leaf of the barley plant, if it interacts in a still with the copper, it can create what's carcinogen called ethyl carbamate. And anyhow, but this variety is GN free, and in the States they don't seem to care about that so much, but in Europe they do, and in Canada they're a little more stringent on. Yeah, I'm not really overly concerned about GN and barley, to be quite honest. I mean, ethanol is far more of a carcinogen than
Yeah.
little little thing that's in the anyway. choose your battles.
Yeah. Well, in
Eh,
addition to the Sunglider,
oh,
you at Admiral, you're part of another project from Sierra Nevada that I was reading, the Hop Forward Sustainable Ale. That looks really awesome as well. What can you tell people about that one?
so there they go. We've worked quite a bit with Sierra Nevada. Again, Ken Grossman. I think in a different life, he'd would have opened a malting facility,
Yeah.
maybe or a malting facility and a brewery. Ran that. He was instrumental in helping us open. Fantastic work, and he was an investor in our first go rounds. And so we've worked closely with Sierra Nevada. They have an estate. It's gone through different. Every project has its ups and downs. And they've had some rough luck with some harvests and things like that. But in general, they've grown some spectacular barley there. We've malted it and given it back to them. They've done different projects. A while back when I had Thirsty Bear, they would only do organic beers out of there. And that was, they had organic hops, they had organic barley and all that. They still only do organic there. We're actually doing a project with them at Chico State where we're growing 30 acres conventionally, 30 acres in a sustainable, what their department, considers sustainable practices and all that. And I'm sure they're going to use that in their estate project and all that. But this is just different. I think they did it for Earth Day, and it's all organic. And the first version they ever did actually had this wheat in it that we got called Harani, Honore Harani. It was grown out under the tutelage of Honore Farms by Full Belly Farms, and it's a ancient heirloom wheat that was actually archaeologists unearthed it in this old fortress in Palestine in Israel. That's called the fortress was called Masada. It was a fortress that Herod the Great had built, and the Romans lost it, and this Jewish tribe took it over and had it for a long time, and then it was retaken by the Romans. When they destroyed it, they found some of these seeds, 2,000 years later, and it made a really interesting wheat. And Sierra Nevada had that in its first
Oh,
version.
wow.
And yeah, and that was grown organically. But they use a good amount of wheat, some of our other more highly kilned malts. We did our first malt, our first Admiral's Hearth, for a collaboration beer that Sierra Nevada did with Weinsteffen for an Oktoberfest. I don't know, about 8 years ago, and it was uh, it was fun. We made a dark Munich style malt, and we still sell it. And we did that for Sierra Nevada originally, and now it's part of our product line. And so, yeah, this hop forward, it's all organic. It's really well balanced. There's a good amount of wheat in it, but it's a darker wheat. It's just an exceptional beer. Um, we're definitely really proud of that, and it must have quite well this year because they ordered a second batch of it to make. I mean, they're not doing Sunglider it must have been, I don't know if they did 160 barrels or they did quite a bit. We sent a good amount of malt to them. The Sierra Nevada, I think, is doing like 20 barrel runs of
Okay.
this at a time, or a little bit smaller. Still, not insignificant.
No, yeah, no. And I mean, you mentioned Hop Butcher before. So when I'm doing research before talking to you, I'm going, on your website, looking at all of the breweries that have worked with you. I'm going to have to get a bigger Zoom package if I wanted to list them. So I'm not going to list them all here, but all over the country, obviously most in California because that's where you're at, but it's not just California breweries. Like I said, Hop Butcher here, breweries out east, Midwest, you name it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what strategies do you employ to inform breweries that, you could use craft malt? It's not as expensive as you may think. This is accessible not just to California, but to the Midwest, East Coast, all over.
Yeah, I mean, most of these people out of state, it would be through a collaboration with a California brewer that they first heard of it. They follow us on Instagram. They're like, "Whoa, a malt maltings in California. Well, or they hear, "Oh, Firestone uses Sierra Nevada," or plenty of other, Russian River even has done, some malt with us. Those are the big craft brewers, but we have smaller craft brewers that basically use 100% of our malt, and these names may not be, super meaningful, like Discretion or Standard Deviant or Brew Built, and then even, much smaller, breweries. But at well, hell, down south, I mean, Highland Park loves to use our malt for, its, double dry hop, double IPA Pillow, and its Timbo Pills. Its flagship is over 50% of our, and they found that it just made a better background as an expression for the hops, and they just preferred it. Or, Smog City now came out with a new beer, just, I would say, in the past 6 months, called, Smog Check,
Okay.
where they're some of our, and pizza port. So I'm talking about, and again, they may not use 100% like some of these other breweries or smaller breweries use, but they use enough to make an impact. I know Drake's was making, it was called Bold Rush now, and they through Bear Republic, they have a similar product called Oski, because they own both portfolios and everything. But they used our malt, and then boom, they got a gold medal at the World Beer Cup with it. We have, I mean, that would be something. If you go onto our website under customer support, we have a list of just, it's, I don't know, it's like 3 pages long, but of major awards that brewers and using our malt have used. I should probably do the same for distillers, but I haven't.
There you go. It's
Um,
something to do now. You have to do that.
yeah. Exactly, but yeah, we're very fortunate. So, the out of the state people mostly have come to us, or met us through their, California colleagues or at a conference or something like that. I do not actively push. I've probably emailed or called or Instagrammed, just more than half the breweries in California, for sure more than half. And so I directly do outreach there. I mean, I at one point thought, I'll just answer the phone. This is such a great idea. Who wouldn't wanna get, California grown floor malted, but like anything, especially if you're more expensive, and we can be, if you get a decent deal and you can pay 70 cents a pound for, commercial malt through, Country Malt or BSG or something like that, uh, you know, uh, we could be a buck 20. So we're not, but what it comes down to is like 12 cents a pint.
Yeah.
And you can see that as a lot or a little. I often tell people, hey, charge a quarter more and take 13 cents more to the bank and cover your extra costs, and you still have this better than the margins you got before. And then someone goes, "Well, why is this 7.25 instead of $7?" And you go, "Well, you're supporting your California farmers. You have a lower carbon footprint. It's floor malted. I can tell you the guy's name who farmed it. I can point to, whatever, it's more aromatic, it's fresher. These beers are, but, most people don't, we're in a game where every penny counts. It's hyper competitive out there. No one wants to charge more. So, places, people that do, in a direct to consumer environment where you're selling pints over the bar, that's where, you can do it. And certainly in like a classic lager beer where you're not double dry hopping and putting in, hundreds of dollars per, or that would be per barrel, where you're not, not hundreds of dollars, but where you're not spending $40 a barrel or something on hops. But your hop is tempered, and your ABV might be lower. That's a perfect situation where you can, buy better ingredients that you're going to showcase. But hey, I'm not going to tell you it's not a struggle to get people to pay more money. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, especially nowadays. Well, what do you see where do you see Admiral Maltings in 10 years? And what would it mean to California's beer and farming landscape if you get there?
I'd like to see us do something almost similar. Uh, Allagash in Maine. Now, there's a brewer. They're not a, they, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago. And I know that's a big difference, but maybe it was 10 years ago. They had said 2 million pounds by 20, whatever. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to use grains from Maine in their beer. It's a little easier when you use a lot of raw grain. in your beer, in your when your Allagash White is their, number one. So it's phenomenal beer. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
But, I'd like to see something like that in California where a brewery or breweries that are a little larger make that it doesn't even have to be one make it. Maybe it's just the ground up swelling that we've created, like you say, look at our customers and all that. But I would like to see barley become a more important crop in California for all sorts of reasons, both agricultural and sustainability reasons. I'd like to see people have that option to express terroir in a beer. Terroir is bred out of the other bigger because if you're either selling super fresh malt, then you can't really sell malt that's, been 9 months and 6 months in a silo because it's gonna get blended, and then it's gonna get bagged, and then that's its born on date, which is at least 6 months after it's out of the kiln or something like that. You you're using different varieties of barley because you gotta cover your butt,
Yeah.
right? You can't just depend on one variety, one farmer, in one region. So you have various farmers in various regions, and the way you take care of that, and that also leads to a type of consistency. Blending is the best consistency for everything, but it takes away character. It takes away terroir. So I'd like to, put terroir and character and celebrate that malt's an agricultural product. Celebrate it the same way that a winemaker does. That they say, oh, this year the bricks is higher, there's more concentrated sugars, there's less concentrated sugars, whatever it is, but work with it. Work with it that year and express what the land gave you, what Mother Nature gave you. Now, and some brewers are all over it. Others they don't want to adjust their mill. They don't have to adjust their recipe. They don't want one malt that had more extract, the other that had less, the one that's harder, one that's, bigger, small. But we are super consistent. Don't get me
Mhm.
wrong.
Yeah.
We're not actually asking for much patience. We just happen to work with great farmers. We have a great variety that we focus on. And so we can do that. But it does express terroir. So I would like to see a resilient supply chain with farmers able to use barley and rye and wheat and even other crops, grain crops, that can be in their mix of products that are done that are disease resistant, that do for example, during the pandemic, if all of a sudden containers aren't coming back from China and therefore you can't get a container of malt from Weirman in Germany or whatever. Well, all I had to do is ship it from 60, miles away. And here it's all, I don't need rail, much less ships and
Yeah.
containers and things like that. So, and my farmer is happier for it and all that. And so, it gives him, he gets good money for it. And I gave a farmer maltster brewer event for beer week, a set beer week. And I was really touched in a way that the farmer said, Ron and Curtis and I are the two owner operators right now. Another founder of ours was Dave McLean, who was known for Magnolia, and now he's opening Hidden Splendor. But he's back in the beer business where he's using our malt. But where in any case, they were just like, well, Ron and Curtis are willing to pay. They back us with their wallets. They pay us a fair price. That's another reason our malt is more expensive. We don't we're not that company that to Colorado Maltings was telling them, we're not giving you enough money to keep your farm. Sorry. If you have to sell your farm tough beans. We need to keep we want it at 9 cents a pound or 11 cents a pound or whatever they were getting. We'll pay our farmer what we pay for our barley. Some large brewers are paying for their malt. It's that's just the fact of the matter. Now, is that good? I don't know. At the end of the day, people's pocketbooks do matter.
Yeah.
So it's good. You're supporting something that's really good. And that's one reason, podcasts and educational formats where people can see it being malted. And we take people out. We have a harvest festival. We'll take people out to visit the farm and watch the harvesters take their first passes in, usually it's the last week of May, first week of June here in, near Woodland where Farmer Week, it's really cool. People just can't believe it. When people come in and do a tour of the malt house, the first thing I do is I hold up just a dried piece of barley. I go, "This is beer right here. This is just this little stalk where it looks like, some people can't distinguish it from wheat or whatever, no, this is beer here." And, it all comes down to the farmer and what kind of support and love we wanna give to our local farmer. Do we want local farmers to stay in business, or do we want them selling all out to the industrial, farmers? So yeah, yeah, it's complicated,
Yeah, but rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody's got to eat. The farmers got to eat. If they're making money, that money goes into the economy. You know,
absolutely.
yeah,
They get to pay, one thing that we found is just to store the barley
yeah.
is a whole thing. To clean the barley is a whole thing. To fix those machines, to do all that kind of stuff. To maintain the seed, certified seed, and it just it reverberates out there. It's, the ripple in a pond just going everywhere. So yeah, that's what we offer. Beside, I'd like to see, the proportion that our beers and whiskeys are recognized by judging is vastly disproportionate to our less than 0.1%. Maybe let's say the Brewers Cup of California, we might win 14, 16% of the awards there, and there's no possible way we're even putting out 0.1% of the malt. So that says something about the
Oh
quality.
yeah,
The fact that Firestone or Sierra Nevada are even working with us, it's not just out of charity.
yeah.
You know?
I mean, it has to be good.
They're not gonna put out, slop out there. So, yeah, yeah, I'm really proud of what we've done, and so, okay, where would I like to see it? So, I would like to see it be part of our agricultural economy more. I'd like to be see terroir as part of the expression more of what kind of beers that California comes in, not just our style, a West Coast style IPA or a West Coast Pilsner, but terroir in that. We wanna take it even further. We wanna work with farmers, and we just bought, the first one's gonna be delivered, but the brand name's called a New American Stone Mill, and we're gonna stone mill flour, the same wheat that we grow to make, malting. Community Grains is using it, the mill, which is a bakery on Divisadero in San Francisco, is using it. This is the Patwin wheat. It's a really nice wheat, and, we'd like to make that available to bakers. Look, so again, d you know, fresh flour is gonna be way better
Yeah.
than flour that's, we don't even think of that because it's not an option. There was a time, not just when every town had its own brewery and probably locally barley was grown. At one point, believe it or not, New York State was the country's biggest barley producer. It was probably colonial times,
Yeah.
but still, the point being is everyone, you could grow it, in many places, but that every town had a mill for flour and all, and that's not, so we just want to give that local option, give the farmer a viable economic option to, some people call it parity. In other words, what does it cost me to grow the crop, and what do I get to sell it for? It better not cost me more to grow it than it does to sell, but that happens all the time. All the time. Farmers, yeah, that's why there's fewer family farms.
Yeah.
That's just it, you know?
Well, I know your time is short. Let me just get you out of here real quick on one thing that I noticed, and hopefully this works well for you. But I'm noticing here in Chicago that we're shifting towards more lower ABV beers. We're getting
Yes,
into lagers. In the past with these hazy IPAs, you could hide a lot behind this big wall of Citra and Mosaic. You could hide a lot
absolutely.
of imperfections. So with these lower ABV beers and lagers, that has to benefit a company like you where you could really showcase the malt and make a better product for jamokes like me, just your average beer drinker.
I think that it's a huge opportunity that and, to speak to my old I remember when I was taken, at the American Brewers Guild and Dr. Lewis was giving them he would say, "Why don't you craft brewers make a decent lager?" And, seize that don't just grab the IPA portion of the craft beer market, but grab to the common consumer. We have a company called Fathers that's doing that just now. They hope to be national and all that. They just did their first contract, big batch at Gordon Biersch, and all that. But they're focusing on organic and lower micropat, but it's a lager. It's a 5% American lager, organic malt. It is so freaking delicious. And that's what we need to you know what else? I can sit with you and drink, 4
Yeah.
of those and still be able to go home and be okay, whereas I can't drink 4 7% alcohol. I can, but you may not enjoy my
Yeah.
conversation. And or the health benefits to that. So, no, it's critical both to expand our consumer, appeal and, just, to an old traditional the subtleties in there. It's just like hell, in France, they just had a huge competition on baguettes,
Mhm.
right? Has to be just white flour, yeast, and water and salt, and nothing else in a certain but the point being is the incredible flavors and the simplicity, and that's what I hope, that the lower AB beers can also do is, again, to put that malt on the pedestal, make people appreciate that a little bit more, both the terroir and, again, you're not hiding behind hops, you're not hiding behind alcohol, you're just presenting this clean, drinkable, well-balanced, bready, soft, biscuity, beverage, and, I'm all for it. That's where my tendency these days, quite honestly.
All right. Well, later on in the show, I'm going to be having the Sunglider
Ups
from Firestone Walker. So I'm really excited about trying something from Admiral Maltings. I might sneak in a lager too, just to get a nice, good, bready lager in there. But I
Absolutely.
appreciate you so much for taking the time out today, Ron. I mean, I learned a lot. I hope everyone that's listened picked up a lot. This has been just an absolute blank ton of fun. So I do appreciate you taking time out today, sir.
You're really
Yeah,
knowledgeable, you're easy to talk
yeah,
to, and it's been totally enjoyable for me.
yeah,
I think your questions, have been perfect.
yeah,
So thank you for doing such a
yeah.
great
All right. Well, we'll talk to you down the road and cheers, everyone.
cheers.
All right, the beer I'm going to have now, we were talking about with Ron. This is Sunglider Golden Lager by Firestone Walker. This is a Helles style lager inspired by the classic lagers in Europe, used local Atlas barley grown in the Central Valley and floor malted right at Admiral Malt in Alameda. So the hops they use in this are also from Oregon. That's really cool. I really like this project. I was happy when Firestone sent this my way. Once again, they sent it my way. I didn't pay for this, but I would if I saw it. So I'm a big fan of theirs. Let's crack open this Sunglider Golden Lager. Beautiful, nice, light golden color. Smells great. I mean, the aroma that I get from there, I'm getting, I mean, it's definitely, they use European style hops. So you're not getting your IPA hops. I'm getting like some floral. I get a little spiciness out of this. I think the smell is really good. Now I'm really excited to try this with the malt. That's outstanding. Wonderful flavors here. Getting like some like biscuity notes, some bready notes. It's really good. I'm getting like some flavors from the hops. I get a lot of trying to put my word on it. There's like some sweetness there. I don't know, like almost like a little apple, maybe. There's some tartness to this as well. This is just an excellent beer. If you're a fan of lagers, if you're a fan of Helles style lagers, I think you're going to like this. If you're around where Firestone Walker distributes Sunglider, excellent beer. You got to grab it. It's fantastic. Wonderful beer for when it finally gets warmer here in Chicago. Hopefully that'll be soon. But this could be a nice crushable beer to have. I'm sure it's a lot warmer in California, but here in Chicago it's still a little chilly. I still have snow on the ground, but it's a great beer. If you see it, definitely throw this one in the cart. This Sunglider from Firestone Walker is excellent. All right, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Beer in Front. I thank you for listening. If you have any beer ideas, show suggestions, please feel free to get a hold of me. Thanks again to Ron Silberstein from Admiral Maltings for coming on, talking malt. Phenomenal interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking to him. Thanks again to Firestone Walker for sending me the Sunglider. Great beer. If you see it, grab it. Have a great week, everyone. I'll talk to you next week. And remember, sometimes the beer or the malt in front of you is the best one yet.